So next up, we'll cover one of the most important components, probably the signature Bootstrap component aside from the grid system, which is the navbar. Navbars usually are pretty much found on every website these days, and it can be a lot of work to make your own, especially if you're making a responsive navbar that's also accessible, that also looks good. So, if you watch some of this here, this navbar, the purple one, changes shape a bit. Some of the content moves around and shrinks, and then it stacks. But then if you watch this navbar come into play, this search, there's this expandable drawer or collapsible drawer, however you want to think about it. Let's find another quick example just on the navbar docs. Notice all of the different variations for navbars. So we can have a simple one where we don't have much going on and we just have a couple of links. We can have ones that have forms embedded, and this is the behavior that is most important, that collapse right there where we move into a drawer shape. Further down, we have other options, different ways of collapsing, changing colors. So like everything in Bootstrap, we could do this on our own. It's just a lot of work. So you can customize these. You can change the colors and the fonts and the height and everything. But the core mechanic of having a collapsible navbar that works well on small screen sizes and large screen sizes is what draws people to using the navbar component. Now, with that said, for as commonly used as the navbar is, I will say in my experience, over, 5-6 years of using them, I can never, ever remember the syntax. So there's no shame in that, at least not for me. Don't feel pressure to recall this compared to, the grid system or a button component in Bootstrap. Those are simple. They're easy enough to remember after some practice. Navbars, look at all of this. I can never remember the specific class names. We've got a whole bunch of different things: navbar, navbar brand, navbar light, collapse, navbar nav item, nav link. There's just a lot here. But let's start nice and simple. Here is how we can make the most basic navbar. It has a navbar brand, which is a class we use to create the sort of the title, the main branding for your navbar. Often there'll be a logo next to it, like that right there. So all we need to do is create a nav. It could also be a div, but a nav makes a lot more sense with the class of navbar. And then we need to choose if we're using a navbar light or navbar dark, and then pick the background. And why don't I just copy this over so you can see. I've got a new document, totally empty, except I have Bootstrap included. At the top of my body, I'll put this navbar. So I'll refresh, and there it is. So there's nothing in there, nothing to collapse, but there is this brand. Now there's another way of doing this navbar brand. You can use the h1 class to make it larger. I'll just keep it as an anchor tag, but I'm going to show you another navbar. This time we'll do navbar dark. Now what does that actually change? You might think that changes the background, but it does not. It's simply changing the text. And then we can change that background to be whatever we want using CSS, or I can do things like BG primary. And now I have a dark-ish navbar, it's blue, and then I have the light text. So this class here, navbar light, navbar dark, is for the text of the navbar. It is not for the actual background. Okay, so then if we want to add, images in for a logo, we can do that. You can just embed an image inside of that navbar brand anchor tag. And then we can add a bunch of links in. Now, this is really common, right? For navigation, we have nav links. There are a couple of ways of doing this. You can use a UL with a bunch of LIs. Or what I like to do that's even simpler is to use just a div with a bunch of anchor tags inside of it, just because the markup is shorter. But even though it's shorter, there's still a lot here. So if we look at some of this stuff, we've got a div with the class of navbar nav, and then each element, each anchor tag has nav item, nav link, and then some of them you can add on active, right? This is supposed to show which link you're currently on. You can disable one so it's grayed out. So if I try this here, just going to add this on somewhere into one of my navbars. We'll do a div with a navbar-nav class. And then inside of that, we're going to have nav item, nav link on our anchor tags. Nav item, nav link. Come up with an href. Let's just go with home. And then duplicate that a couple of times. We'll go with about and contact. Sure. Okay, refresh. Not quite what I was hoping for. So what's going on here? Well, we're missing a couple of things in order to make this work. As you can see, I skipped over some of this markup. So we need to wrap this in a collapse, navbar collapse div. Now that seems a bit excessive, but let's just do it. Collapse, navbar dash collapse. And this is the syntax I'm talking about that I can just never recall on my own. Let's refresh. Okay, well now our content is just gone entirely. What happened? Well, this has to do with what this collapse class does. The collapse plugin is part of Bootstrap. We can use it to collapse things and show and hide them. For example, make a little accordion, or keep going down here. Here's another example. It's also used for navbars to show and hide content to collapse that drawer or to collapse a navbar. So what we need to do now is add in a class, navbar expand, and then some size. And this is going to indicate to Bootstrap when we want the collapse to stop. So right now it's collapsed here. And then when do I want it to expand? Large or small or medium or extra large. So we add that to the navbar. So I'll do that here. Navbar dash expand. Let's just do large for now. Refresh. And there's our links, but they go away on extra small and medium. We hit large, they show up. So if I change that to small, for example, now I go to extra small, it's gone. I go to small and they appear. Medium, large, extra large, they're here. All right, so we're still missing an important piece though, which is how do I get that drawer toggle thing to work? How do I see the content? Well, what we need to add is our navbar toggler button. So this is going to create that, what people usually call a hamburger icon right here, that will toggle the navbar open and closed. And then the way that we do this is a little bit complicated, or it's a little different than what we've seen so far. So we can create our button with a class of navbar toggler. We put a span inside with the class of navbar toggler icon. So we can do that. Nice and easy, hopefully. So button, the class of navbar toggler, and then a span with the class of navbar toggler icon, just like that. Refresh. Let's shrink down. Okay, it appears, but it doesn't do anything. Why is it not working? Well, we need to connect it to this div right here, the thing that's collapsing. We need to connect this button so that when you click, it expands. So we need to connect them in a way. And the way we do this is by setting a data target attributes and a data toggle. So we say data toggle is collapse, and data target is the ID of something that we want it to expand or collapse, which is this div right here. Notice there's an ID, navbar nav alt markup. Data target, navbar nav alt markup. So on this div, the whole parent of our navbar nav, right in there, I'm going to add ID, and I'm going to do something obvious, something like expand me. And then on our button, we add data target equals, and then expand me. So now they are connected. I also need to set this data toggle to be collapse. Again, this is the syntax I never remember. Don't feel like it has to make perfect sense. Let's see what happens now. So it appears, I click, and there we go. It's working. Cool. A couple of things I'll point out. You must have JavaScript here, right? If you don't have the Bootstrap JavaScripts included, I refresh, it's not going to work. So that's one example where you need those scripts, and now it works. The other thing I'll point out is that we can put other content in there. Anything that goes in this div right here that has the class of collapse, anything in here is going to be added to that drawer. So you can add drop downs, which we haven't covered, but they're simple enough. You can add forms if you wanted to. We could do that here. Actually, I'm just copy this form to make it nice and quick. Let's put this after our nav right there. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, looks all right, but maybe I want to move it to the right-hand side. So there's a couple of ways of doing this, but the easiest one is to use a special class we have yet to see, so I'm jumping ahead, margin left auto. So it's just going to set margin left to be auto on this whole form, which we could do on our own. We've seen how to do, margin auto just via CSS, but let's see what happens. We hit collapse, and now they stack, and it looks okay. Maybe we want this to be a little, I don't know, it's a bit wide there in my opinion. Maybe they should share the space on a small screen. I don't know. We can figure that out. But I would change this button so it's not success. Maybe button outline light. Let's see what that looks like. Expand. Yeah, that looks better. Search. Yeah, it's pretty good. So the last thing I'll show you, there's a lot more to navbars. You can make much fancier navbars with a lot more content in them. You can create custom color schemes by setting your background color on the navbar itself. Or what I want to highlight is that we can place them differently. So we can have a navbar that is fixed at the top of the screen. So I'll show you what that would look like. Right now, we can't really get a good feel for this, but if I add a bunch of content just down here, I'll add a container. And that reminds me, you can add a container inside of your navbar, which looks like this here, so that your content is constrained a bit inside the navbar. Ours goes all the way to the edge, but I could wrap everything in a container. Container, and then move that down to the end of my nav. And that looks like this. So it doesn't look great. The other thing you can do is put your navbar in a container, and it will be constrained, or it will have more spacing on the sides. It won't go all the way across the screen. Okay, so I'm going to add a bunch of content down here. Why don't I just do, I don't know, what should we do? Lorem ipsum times 100 maybe? Okay, so now I've got some stuff to scroll through. So the default is that my navbar just goes away as I scroll, but we have some options here. I can change the placement to be fixed-top, for example. So on the navbar itself, I'm going to comment out this simple nav and give it fixed-top and refresh. Now check it out. It's fixed to the top as I scroll. It's pretty nice. The other option, well, there's a couple other, but another one is fixed bottom. So this is less common, but sometimes you do want a bottom nav. Now it's fixed on the bottom, right? So I could have a header and a footer that just stay there if I wanted to. Or not a header and a footer, but a nav on the top and bottom. And the last one is a little bit different. It's a sticky navbar, sticky-top. So if I add that class in, sticky-top, we're not going to see anything really at all change. It looks like it's just fixed to the top, and it is. But if we add some content before our nav, I'll do maybe an h1 with the class of display1. I don't know, navbars. Let's also center it. It doesn't matter, but let's center it. Refresh. Okay. So what do we see here? Well, my content is not fixed to the top. There's stuff above it. But as I scroll, now it gets stuck. It sticks to the top, hence the term sticky, and it stays there. So you may have seen things like this. Sometimes there'll be like some sort of header with an image, something navbars, and then maybe we could have a smaller display. How about H2 with display of 4? R, so cool. And then a paragraph with the text with a class of lead, lorem. I don't know. We could have a little header up there. Well, none of this is centered. It doesn't look good at all. But as you scroll, it gets stuck. Design is not really what we're talking about right now. Just mechanically how this navbar works. So that can be cool. And again, all of this is stuff that would be a lot of work on our own to recreate. So I'm just going to leave it at fixed top. But just remember there are those different options. And there we go. It stays up top. All right, so that's a lot of content around navbars. And again, if you ever want to do something more complex, you want to add a drop down, you want to change a color, there's just different features you want to add in, different buttons, different components. Take a look at the docs. They're very thorough, lots of examples. And like I said, I have to refer to the docs pretty much every time I do anything with a navbar in Bootstrap. I just never remember it. Cool.